This podcast is proud to be part of the Blueberry Network. That's blueberrywithnoease.com.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire, and you're listening to Transpersonal Radio with Angela Lynn Gibson. Remember, your thoughts upload your reality. Think wisely and always prepare to ignite.
Welcome to Transpersonal Radio. TranspersonalRadio.com. Real talk for real life. Inspiring podcasts. Exploring personal empowerment and transformation through parapsychology, spirituality, and how your thoughts upload your reality. And now your host, Angela L. Gibson.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/transpersonal radio. Over 150,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Hello, Transpersonal Radio listeners. I'm excited about today's interview. We have a special treat for you that touches on a topic of great interest to me. As an intuitive medium, I am intrigued by others who are able to channel or connect with disembodied spirits and entities on the other side. I hope you find this interview as fascinating as I do. Some of you may be familiar with the spirit entity who identifies himself as Seth. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, Jane Roberts, a psychic and spirit medium, channeled messages from him and wrote her book, Seth Material. In late 1963, Jane and her partner began experimenting with an Ouija board, and Jane began receiving coherent messages from a spirit who identified himself as Seth. Jane continued communicating with Seth through the Ouija board for several more sessions until she eventually began channeling communications from Seth via trance mediumship. For the next 21 years, Jane had over 1,500 trance sessions where she channeled information on Seth's behalf. The last time Seth was heard from was 1984, until now. My guest today is Mark Alan Frost. Mark has a master's in counseling psychology and has authored 11 books to date by channeling the spirit entity who calls himself Seth. Mark explains that Seth can teach you how to create positive realities, heal yourself, create abundance, find love, discover your mission, and manifest your highest potential in this lifetime. Mark, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
It's a pleasure, Angela.
Mark, you have your master's degree in counseling psychology. Were you a mainstream counselor before getting involved in the metaphysical or paranormal world?
Well, when I first met Seth, yes, I was a counseling intern at Dominican University in Santa Fe. I also had regular clients in my clinical hypnotherapy practice off campus. And it was in my little hypnotherapy office that I first met Seth. So you could say that, yes, I was sort of a mainstream and alternative counselor when I met Seth.
Excellent. We know that Jane Roberts was using a Ouija board when she first started communicating with Seth. Have you ever used a Ouija board, and did you ever use a spirit or talking board to communicate with Seth?
The Ouija? No, I've never used that. My sister and I experimented with it back when we were kids, and she was very good at it.
Oh, excellent.
But I was sort of I guess I was scared of it.
As are a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting, just a side note, there's such a debate about Ouija boards, and for me, when I talk about Ouija board, it's simply a tool. It's cardboard or wood, same as you would have paper, tarot cards, whatever. It's just a tool. But I think what happens is people go into it expecting something bad to happen, or they go into it with fear, and of course, whatever you think you manifest, right?
Exactly.
So you said that Seth first appeared to you when you were doing your intern in counseling and you were doing some hypnotherapy sessions. So that's how Seth first made his appearance to you, was through a hypnotherapy session.
Yes, there's a story there. Well, it was in March of 2002. I was seeing a client in my hypnotherapy practice. She was interested in past lives, and I had a a mentor at the university who was steeped in the alternative traditions of healing, including shamanistic healing and so on. And he said, well, take the client and I'll guide you through it. So he gave me some information on how to help a client explore past lives. And when Cass Smith came in, Cass is the name of the client, I did some elementary regressions on her, gave her some suggestions to visit past lives, and she very successfully, it seemed, visited a past life in which she was in the Roman Colosseum being devoured by a lion.
Oh, my.
And so I sort of panicked and said, well, you don't have to experience it. Project your consciousness out and tell me what you see. And she proceeded to give a blow-by-blow detail about what was going on. And it turned out to be very therapeutic for her. As for me, I was saying to myself, well, it looks like I'm going to collaborate in some sort of book on past lives with this person. That was the information I was getting. But what happened was, and this is the life-changing event, we made an appointment to meet again and explore this past life stuff. And in the interim, she phoned me up and said, do you know of somebody named Seth? And I said, yeah. I was a student of Seth for 20 years. What about Seth? She said he's interrupting my meditations and saying he wants to write books again.
Oh, interesting.
And I got very excited and said, well, bring him in and we'll try to pull him into this reality with hypnosis in trance. So she did come in. I did a few regressions, gave her a few suggestions, asked Seth to come in, and in a couple of minutes, he came in.
Wow.
Cass, it was awesome. Cass, that in this very deep voice. She's a female with sort of a light voice. I'm here. I said, Seth? And he said, I'm here, Mark. You asked for me, I'm here.
You
so
rang?
You rang, yeah, it's about that. Yeah, it's very much like that. It's like the genie answering. And so I gave him I asked a few questions confirming whether it was the Seth. I said, are you Jane Roberts Seth? Indeed I am, he said. I asked him about the nature of his reality. How does he perceive of himself? How do we look to him? And so on and so on. I asked a few questions about Robert Butts, and he or she gave immediate, comprehensive answers to these questions.
Excellent. And for our listeners who might not be familiar with the history of Seth and Jane Roberts, Robert Butts was her, I believe, her second husband, and those were the two that were working with the Ouija board when Seth first came through. Is that correct?
That's quite correct,
Okay.
yes.
Excellent. Now, why do you believe Seth chose you or chose Cass?
Well, it was, let me put it this way. In retrospect, I can see, but in the moment, I was bamboozled and sort of awestruck, and I was in that altered state for weeks. But over time, I've come to see why, and the reasons are, I think, that Seth, he wanted to return and to write books simplifying his theories. In his mind, he was a little too complex and inaccessible in the original Seth Material. And so he returned to create books with new collaborators to appeal to a broader audience, is the way he put it.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because we know throughout history human consciousness has continued to evolve to different levels. And I can imagine, I did watch several of Jane Roberts, the actual footage from the 70s when she was channeling Seth, and I can imagine even for that time, it was a little bit ahead of its time. And we've, since the 70s, I think it's safe to say that we've evolved quite a bit through all of the events that we've experienced, and then also, the whole idea of moving into the Aquarian age after post, 21st December of 2012. So it makes sense that we would need to revisit information that we might have a better understanding of, and also information that you can relay in a way that's more in layman's terms.
Exactly. Additionally, I had sort of this natural skill set that would enable me to do the project. I was this guy in grad school, and I was immersed in the alternative therapies such as hypnosis and that type of thing. I had a history of reading his books. I was this dedicated Seth student for many years, but I sort of put them on the shelf for many years also. So it was perfect. Also, I was in this academic situation where I had to write papers on psychology and so on. And so that sort of shines through in these new books with Seth. They have a psychological aspect, whereas with Jane there was more of a poetic writing, not so much a feminine touch, but there is a definite difference.
Excellent. And, one of the things that really excites me about this, Mark, is I might have been a little more skeptical if I would have known your history and, you were a student of Seth's for 20 years. And so how do we know it's just not sort of, suggestion or you kind of drawing out what you had learned? But for Seth to have appeared with one of your clients who underwent hypnosis with you one time, to have appeared to her, I'm sure she never heard of Seth. She had no idea who this person was. So it's really, really interesting that Seth chose that route. It's almost as if it was when I'm doing mediumship, we talk about points of validation. It's almost a point of validation for him to appear to someone who had no knowledge of him prior.
Yes, exactly. That's the way I put it also. When people ask me, well, how do you know it's him? Is this a hoax, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, if that's what's saying. It baffles me because I'm talking from my own experience. Cass walked into my little office. Seth opened her eyes as Cass and looked me in the eyes, and her eyes were literally all pupil.
Wow.
Any iris, and said, "You asked for me, Mark. I'm here."
That's fascinating.
And gives me all this validation. So it is. I'm already convinced. It did take me a few weeks to consider the enormity of that contact, however.
Well, that's one of the questions I had for you. When Seth first appeared to you, what was your initial reaction? And did it take a few times before you believed it? I mean, were you ever skeptical and, question whether it was all real?
Yeah, the previous reading of his material set me up for a gradual letting go of what he calls the ego intellect. The ego intellect aspect of me wanted to find something wrong with it because I didn't want to. At the time, I thought I was going to be this marriage and family therapist with a specialty in hypnotherapy. And I thought it was going to upset my life in some way. But once I put my plans on the side and allowed his communication stream to come in, and he told me what he had in store for me, I let go of all of that stuff and accepted it on sort of a soul level.
Well, I think that in of itself is a great lesson for all of us because our ego intellect tends to steer us off course more often than we'd like to admit. Yes,
Seth's books with us are all about how to remove those barriers to soul and a clear appreciation of the personal reality that you're creating.
I love it. Do you think Seth will choose others to channel his messages as well?
Well, according to him, he does that. He communicates with a multitude, as he said, of humans in this time frame and through telepathy.
Oh, fascinating.
He calls these...
Does he identify himself as Seth, or does he just... So is it sort of like a spirit guide or something like that?
To some, he does, and they call him Seth and so on. To most, however, he acts in accordance to the belief system of the individual. So if one individual might think that they're talking to an angel, let's say, so he assumes an angel form. And according to what he's told me and material that I've read, that's very often what happens with these non-physical beings. They're the way you want them to be so that you can take them in without fear.
That makes perfect sense. And I actually explain a similar concept when I'm talking about mediumship. It's, what I like to say is whether you call it witch energy or angel energy or just, scientific quantum theory, we talk about it in a framework that is able to fit within your own paradigm so that you can take in the information. So what was your belief in or your experience with the world of the paranormal before your interaction with Seth?
Well, I would say that I was immersed in the paranormal from the time I was about 7 on. I used to, in my youth in Ogden, Utah, I used to live in the local library, this Carnegie library that had pillars out front, a classic library structure. So I thought of it as my study, and I would go in there and read these books on urban legends, the paranormal. I was fascinated with flying saucers, ghosts. I really loved this series of books called the Strange books, Stranger Than Science.
Oh, yes.
Stranger Than Strange, and so on.
Yes.
Which were basically urban legends, ghost stories, and that type of thing. But I just loved that stuff, and it resonated with me. It stimulated my consciousness, I think.
Absolutely.
Also, I was interested in reincarnation, and I think at that time I was still in touch with past lives. Some kids retain those memories and resist the socialization process and resist the efforts of their parents to let go of that material.
Exactly.
And I was one of those kids. It took me a long time to forget about that or be forced to forget about it. But yeah, I've been interested in the unusual for many, many years.
I love it. I have as well. It's just part of who I am. And every time I try to run from it or hide it or repress it, it just has a way of popping up again. So, so tell us a little bit, Mark, tell us a little bit about what your life was like before Seth and how your life has changed since Seth has come into your life.
Well, let me see. Before Seth, I was living in Sausalito, California, with my girlfriend, Carol, who's now my wife. We were having fun. We had our cats. We were and are obsessed with cats. So it was a pretty cat-like existence. I was in grad school, and I thought I was headed for this life, as I said, as a MFT with a specialty in hypnotherapy. And that was my main focus. I was an academic. I had no idea that this alternate reality was going to come whisk me away. It was a pretty idyllic existence.
So this is interesting because you have described that you've been interested in the paranormal since you were 7, but it seems it was just more academic, and when it actually became a reality for you, that shifted everything.
Oh, yeah. It shifted everything dramatically, yeah. A 180, I would call it. Do you want me to talk about that?
Oh, absolutely. So before Seth, you're still sort of, you have this plan, and we all know what happens when we make plans, but you have this plan that you're going to be an MFT, you're hanging out with your girlfriend that becomes your wife, and you're having, it sounds like sort of, quote unquote, a normal life, and you have your cat family and everything's kind of good.
Exactly. So what happened was, I became, in the course of a few weeks, I became the channel for Seth, and not an MFT, but obviously I used the skills that I learned in school in my practice with counseling people over the phone and in person as Seth. And being the voice of Seth, who offers his guidance to people all over the world, it means that we are part of this international family, a Seth family of people from all different cultures who call Seth and get advice from him, and we learn about them, we become friends. 90% of them we have never met, but you get a feeling for people over the phone, and it's a unique way to spend a life, I think.
Absolutely. I agree. It's one of the most unique ways for sure. Tell us a little bit about your experience with channeling before your interaction with Seth. Have you ever done any channeling or mediumship work before Seth, or was this sort of your maiden voyage?
Well, I had read a few books on how to channel, and I was just not very good at it. So those books went up on the shelf, where they remain to this day. I'm looking at one right now.
So this is truly a special connection and a special experience that you have with Seth.
Yes, quite true. It's not destiny, but it's a tendency, apparently, that I have in all my lives. As you know, Seth espouses a reincarnational motif for humans. He thinks that we all live many, many lives, past, present, and future. Mm-hmm. And apparently people like us, he calls us his people, the Seth entity human counterparts, the magicians, shamans, witches, and healers of all types. We're always doing this. We're always looking for truth.
Absolutely.
And we're always trying to explain it to other people.
Yes.
And we're always trying to train people to see what we see, to see our visions. So in all my lives, I'm always doing this. That's just the way it is. I've begun to experience the truth of that through what Seth calls bleed-throughs, momentary visions of what's going on in your other lives. And he's right. Apparently I've been punished severely in other lives for witchcraft and that type of thing.
You and me both.
Yeah, and to this day I have these nightmares where I'm being, I don't want to get into it. It's pretty gory. But according to Seth, that's a bleed through in another existence, which occurs simultaneously. That's why we can tune into these other existences, because everything happens at once. Mm-hmm. And so in meditation or trance, you can tune into these other lives. Exactly. Which I do frequently.
Exactly. And that's similar to how, as you know, or you probably know, that's similar to how mediumship works, is all the parallel existences, being able to get into a theta state of mind that you can tap into that energy and that source of information. So
exactly, yes.
For those that find this sort of foreign territory, how would you best describe Seth? Now, you touched on it earlier because you said he is able to appear to various people in ways that they can understand. But if you were to describe his true form or who he really is, what would you call him? Would you call him an angel or a disembodied spirit or a light being? And where is he from? Is he from this universe or a parallel universe? Tell us a little bit about who Seth really is.
Well, let me try. Who is Seth? Well, I would say that, one way to describe it is about the second week of receiving his transmissions in my little hypnotherapy office, I asked him, "What is your form? What do you look like?" And he says, "Well, give Cass a pencil and paper, and I'll draw a self-portrait."
Oh.
So he did, and it's actually on the cover of our second book, the next chapter in the evolution of the soul. He's a light body, and his little self-portrait amounts to a cross of squiggly lines representing energy, light energy.
I love it.
Specifically, love light. He maintains that the love light matrix is the scaffolding, the foundation of all realities. So we are this love energy. And he calls himself that. He also calls himself an energy personality essence. As our listeners may remember, in his work with Jane Roberts, he called himself an energy personality. But with my work with him, I'm finding out what that means. It means that he has had these many, many lives, and he is an educator and a philosopher. So he wants to make himself known to humans in a friendly fashion. And so he takes various aspects from the personalities of his lives and creates this amalgam, a light body energy personality of a sort of grandfatherly type, a friendly grandfather, is what he's trying to put forth, so that people will resonate, open up, and receive his messages.
I love that.
So, an energy personality essence. He also calls himself a light being now, and he says he exists in the fourth, fifth, sixth dimensions and beyond.
Wow.
So he's traveling out of these systems to become, I don't want to get into it, but it's the higher dimensional realms is where he's headed.
Okay. I really, really love that description because, you know, in my studies looking back at the information, at one point they were accusing Jane Roberts of having brought forth a demon through the Ouija board, and that this Seth entity was actually a demon. And you know, there's no way that you could ever convince me that a demon would come through and say, "Yes, I'm love energy and I'm here to better mankind." And I mean, it's just like the antithesis of demonic energy. And I'm so glad that you're helping to educate that the Seth energy has nothing to do with evil or leading people astray. Quite the opposite.
I agree. It's these descriptions that he's a demon and so on are born in fear.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Fear, confusion, and I think each one of us, those of us that are attracted to the non-physical beings, we have to have our sanctuary intact, first of all. You have to have sacred space when you do these explorations, because there is there is a sort of danger that what Seth calls the negative entities can come in and give you negative information. Exactly
right. That what I call lower frequency entities. Yes.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So he is not that. He is definitely who he says he is, and he is composed of love.
Excellent. There seems to be some debate, and I know you've been fielding this since you've started this work in 2002. There's been debate over whether the Seth you're channeling is in fact the same Seth that spoke to Rupert, which is Seth's pet name for Jane Roberts. And you said that you asked several questions to confirm to your satisfaction that it is in fact Seth. So could you get a little bit more in depth there about how you were able to your satisfaction, verify Seth's identity?
Yes. Well, when Seth spoke through Cass, he gave me a great deal of confirming data so that I would be comfortable. This was to counter my fears that Cass was a multiple personality person, that she was coming up with a personality fragment that was not Seth. And so he convinced me, basically, by telling me information about myself that no one else would know, by telling me information about Jane that no one else would know, that I've never seen in print, and even information about what Jane is doing currently. Apparently, she is still a student of Seth, and they communicate, and she's in another system of reality in which she is writing and exploring.
I love it. And I'm going to guess here, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to guess that Cass, when she was in her hypnotic state, in her hypnotic trance, that she was actually even able to tell you identifying information about Seth from 20 years ago that Cass herself wouldn't know or be able to make up because she had no prior knowledge of Seth.
Oh, yeah, that's the big validity confirmation thing for me. Cass had no idea who Seth was. And indeed, as Seth would say, when we published the first book and she became aware of who Seth was and some of the problems that Jane and her husband would have with over-eager Seth fans coming and camping out on their back porch, wanting to know the latest word from Seth, she became concerned because she was this artist's mother living in Northern California, valuing her privacy over everything else, and didn't want that to be disturbed. She wanted to be left alone to raise her daughter, her teenage daughter. And so she put me out there as the, I guess you'd call it the publicity person, the face of the Seth project. And so I said I would take this information and put it in books and then go on lectures and describe it to people and so on. And she would remain in the background. But as it turned out, even that was, she didn't want to do even that. And so she dropped out of the project at the publishing date of the first book.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
A little stressful. So I did watch the YouTube videos of your hypnotherapy sessions with Cass Smith, where she was channeling Seth while in a hypnotic trance, and the initial experience there, for those who are listening who don't know, that was in 2002. So let's go back there for a moment because it was cute. I was listening to the very first one, and when Seth came through for the first time, and I could hear a little consternation in your voice. It was just kind of like, wow, is this really happening? So take us back there for a moment and tell us about how you were feeling and kind of what was going through your mind as this was unfolding before you.
Well, it was a mind blower. It was awe-inspiring. But as I said, at first I thought it was an elaborate prank perpetrated by my colleagues at the university and perhaps by my professor. You never know what's going on there. And I was approaching graduation, so I thought, boy, this is perfect. It's so well done. They know I love Seth. This is the best prank ever.
Oh, wow.
But as you can, well, actually you can't see my face in the videos, but I was in an altered state also during all these Seth sessions, because as Seth mentions in one of the videos, he put the information, the words and phrases in our consciousnesses while we slept, so that when we met in waking reality, I would know the right questions to ask, and Cass would be able to have the answers right there.
That's amazing.
So it's an altered state for everyone involved.
And I'm glad that you also brought up that you were cognizant enough to ask the right questions to make sure that Cass wasn't just exhibiting multiple personality disorder or any mental disorder. You were able to identify this as an actual paranormal event. That's
quite true. There's a little story behind that too, because the day that Seth came through, I was in my little office off campus with her and Seth. So we closed up the office and I went out for lunch. I had 3 run-ins with people who you might say had exhibited the symptoms of multiple personality disorder. It was odd.
In one day, yes.
In one day.
It was like little cookie crumbs that says, okay, when this event is going to occur with Seth, this is like Seth saying, when you actually talk to me, you're going to know that it's not multiple personality disorder because I'm going to put all these cookie crumbs here to show you what that's really like.
Yes, that's exactly it. And another validation thing.
Mm-hmm.
And another way to describe how Seth comes into your consciousness. I can say your consciousness because, yes, I'm writing a book with Seth, but he maintains that he is within the consciousnesses of many, many, many people. So when he comes in, it's sort of a subtle thing, and he never comes in unasked. You have to be open, and you ask for the connection, and he comes in. So on that day, I received this little tingling, an indication that something unusual is going to happen.
Yes.
And then the unusual thing happened. It's that way to this date. So Seth is saying, okay, be on the lookout for unusual phenomena. and then it happens.
I love it. So I'm guessing since Cass decided to remove herself from the project that she probably no longer channels Seth, and now you are channeling Seth directly. So can you tell us how that transition occurred? I mean, was this, did Seth already know this was going to occur ahead of time? And one of the things, again, that I come back to is it's almost like Cass was a placeholder to make the connection between you and Seth.
Yes, that's the way I look at it also. Again, I didn't know that until after the fact, and after the fact, this is 2 years in, I asked Seth and he said, well, yes, Mark, if I told you what was in store for you, probably. He always talks about the probable future.
Mm-hmm.
We have free will,
Absolutely.
But there are tendencies, and so the tendency for me was to maybe jump ship because that was my history.
Well,
that's the way
that makes
he would
sense.
think.
Yeah.
And so he said, we kept it under wraps. He said, I knew that Cass was going to drop out and pursue other spiritual practices. And I thought that might cause you to jump ship again.
Okay.
But because apparently, and this gets kind of interesting, I think, Cass and I made this appointment in other lives. And we made the appointment to do a project with Seth after we were in our 50s. Because prior to the 50s, our lives would be in turmoil, basically.
Okay.
I used to drink a lot, to the degree that it upset my life and my relationships quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So Seth wanted to make sure that I was in a stable state before he brought Cass to me.
Well, that makes sense because that's not only you have to be clear of mind to get the messages and to translate the messages correctly, but also there's a credibility issue as well, right? So.
Oh yes, definitely.
That makes sense. So you and Cass actually made this agreement before you even came into physical form in this lifetime that at some point you were going to begin or embark upon this project.
That's right.
I love it.
Yeah. He calls it keeping appointments with soul family members.
Oh, very nice.
She's in my soul family, and I'm in hers, and all of our lives we meet in different bodies of different sexes, of different sexual orientations, and belief systems, and we learn our lessons together. He calls it the soul family relationship.
You've been listening to part 1 of 2 with Mark Alan Frost, Seth Returns. Be sure to tune in to part 2. Hey, I want to give a shout out to Steve Schoen, an accomplished professional voice actor and audio producer who created my new intro and outro for Transpersonal Radio. Steve is based out of the Sacramento, California area. If you'd like to hire Steve for voiceover work, you can find him at soundsofmyvoice.com. That's sounds with an S, soundsofmyvoice.com. Steve is also an event entertainer and wedding DJ. If you want to liven up your event with a truly talented and fun personality, check out sacramentoweddingdj.com. You can also find Steve on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/steve.schoen. That's SCHON. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you for listening to Transpersonal Radio. If you'd like to suggest a future topic or be a guest, visit transpersonalradio.com. Call the hotline at 619-800-6057 or like our page, facebook.com/transpersonalradio.